In this video, we'll talk about some of the music ideas of Everlong by the Foo Fighters. If you go to myguitarlessons.com, we step you right through playing the song and discussing these music ideas as well. The first music idea that we'll talk about is that this song is in dropped D tuning. And what that means is the guitar is tuned just like normal in standard tuning, except for the sixth string is changed from an E note to a D note, and that's why they call it drop D tuning. So instead of E, A, D, G, B, E, what you want to do is drop the E note down to a D note, and that should match the D string. One's an octave lower, but it's the same note. And the reason why drop D tuning is used is because the song is in the key of D major. At least the mother scale is D major. And so having that nice D root note in the song is very helpful. It's a way to basically make the guitar work a little bit better with the song, since the song is in the key of D major. The next music idea that we'll talk about is eighth notes. So the song is mostly using eighth notes, and you can play them as downstrokes, especially in the verse. So if you're just playing the open D string, or the open sixth string, which is now a D note, you can count the eighth notes. It's 4/4 time. The song is in 4/4 time, meaning there's 4 beats per measure, and each beat is a quarter note. So you can count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and all downstrokes, and then you can also just count the beats. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can hold down the first chord of the song, which is a D major 7 chord, which we'll talk about in a bit, and kind of strum a little bit as well. So 1, 2, 3, 4. The next music idea that we'll talk about is using the open strings to your advantage. So this song is in the key of D major. That's the mother scale of the song. So the first chord is a D major 7 chord, but if you play the open strings, especially the low strings, you now have a D, an A, and a D, which are notes of a D major chord, certainly notes from the D major scale. So those ringing strings will sound fine. So what you can do is use that to your advantage as you're changing chords. Just play some open strings and it's going to sound okay. So if we play just the D major 7 chord, and then on the and of beat 4 we just lift our fingers off, it will sound fine. So that you can use that time to change to a different chord if you wanted to. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You can hear that sound is in the song, and it sounds quite good in the key of D major. The next music idea that we'll talk about is the family of chords related to the key of D major. So the main major key of the song is D major, and there's a family of chords that sound good together in that key. They all use the notes of the D major scale. The 1 chord is D major, the 2 chord is E minor, the 3 chord is F sharp minor, the 4 chord is G major, the 5 chord is A major, the 6 chord is B minor, the 7 chord is C sharp diminished, which is like an A7 except for don't play the A, and then you're back to the 1 chord, which is D major. Now we'll talk about some of the music ideas of a verse of a song. So the verse is basically the same chord progression that's in the introduction. And what we're going to talk about now is the first chord, which is a D major 7 chord, as I mentioned earlier. So let's understand a little bit better why that's a D major 7 chord. What you can do is think about a D major chord that is here in standard tuning, and the D major chord where you're holding the notes on strings 5, 4, and 3, that's basically an E chord moved up so that the root is a D note. Where you hold the note is the 5, 1, and 3 of the chord. So 5, 1, 3. So to make this, to see that this is a major 7 chord, what we're going to do is take the 1 on string 4, drop it down 1 fret, and that brings you to the major 7. And then you're going to take the 5 note on string 5 and drop it down to the 3. And you can see that the 3 note is now played twice in this chord. There's an octave separation between them. So we have 3 major 7 and 3 as the notes of the chord, and then we're going to ring the open D string, which is the root of the chord. So 1, 3, major 7, 3. So that's a D major 7 chord. So there is one note missing. You would normally have the 5, which is an A note, but if you're going to drop one note out of D major 7, the 5 is a pretty safe one, especially since when you ring a D string, some harmonics are generated, and one of the harmonics is this A note. So even just playing this string, even though we mostly hear the D note, there is that A note that's being played at the same time. So this chord, D major 7, is the one chord in the key of D major, and it's a 4-note chord, so it contains the 1, the 3, this one's missing the 5, but it normally would have it, and then the major 7 note. You can play the same chord as an open chord, and it's like a standard D chord, but you drop the 1 again. Where you're holding the D chord is a 5, 1, 3 as well. So that's true for the E chord, 5, 1, 3, the A chord, 5, 1, 3, and the D chord, 5, 1, 3. So now we just take that 1 and we drop it to a major 7. So this is a D major 7. So that's the same chord, but a different voicing. So it sounds a little different, but you can tell that they're similar too. It's the same chord. So you can play it up here or down here. The next thing we're going to talk about is the second chord used in the song. So the first chord, as we mentioned, was a D major 7 chord. The second chord is played simply by taking your index finger and moving it across both the 6th and 5th strings. So you're barring across both strings. So only one note is different. Instead of the open D string, you're now playing a B note on the 6th string. So you would normally, if this were standard tuning, the B note would be here at the 7th fret. But since we dropped everything 2 frets, you have to move up 2 frets in order to play the same note. So this is a B note. So now the chord looks like that. And the way to visualize that what this chord is to go back to thinking of in standard tuning, a B chord, a B major chord. Again, this will be an E-shaped B major chord. And we have the 5, 1, and 3 where we're holding our fingers. So if we look at the chord that we're playing the 5, but instead of the 1, we're playing this note, which is the 2. So now we have the 1 of the chord, which is the B, the 5, the 2, and then if we look at the third string, we're taking the 3 and we're moving it up to 4 to 5. So we basically have a B sus2 chord. So we have the root, the 5, the 2, and then the 5 again. You can also see that the 5 is just an octave. So the 5 is duplicated. So this is called a B sus2 chord. And what's interesting about this chord is it's not major or minor. The third has been replaced with a 2. So you can't identify this as a major or minor chord, and that adds somewhat to the ambiguity in the song, in that the chord isn't major or minor. Even though we'll see that the melody of the verse is in B minor, this chord is not minor or major, it's a B sus2 chord. So that's the second chord of the song. The next music idea that we'll talk about is the rhythm used for the beginning of the song. So this is a little bit of a syncopated or irregular rhythm, so it takes some practice to actually get it. What you want to do is think about always playing on the downstroke. So you're either going to play just the D string or you're going to play the notes of the chord. So you're always going to be playing something. So this rhythm, the first chord starts on beat 2. So that song actually, if you listen, it starts with 2 eighth notes. So it sounds like this. And it's hard to count as you're playing that, but you're basically, if you take it slowly, you can work on it and get to that point. So you could also tap the rhythm just without the guitar, just to get the feel for it better. So if you're counting, then you start tapping on the 2. The first beat is not where the rhythm starts. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. 1. So that's basically what you're playing on the guitar. So it takes a little bit of practice. You got to work it out. So. The same rhythm is used for the B sus2 chord as well. So it's going to sound like this. The next music idea that we'll talk about is the D major scale on string 6 as you're tuned in drop D tuning. And the reason why this is good to know is because if you're playing a chord that has a root on the 6th string, you can name the chord by knowing the root. So it helps you visualize where you are on the guitar, what chords you're playing. So to play the scale on the 6th string, the 1 note is a D note, the 2 note is at the 2nd fret, is an E note, the 3 is an F sharp at fret 4, the 4 is a G note at fret 5, the 5 is an A note at fret 7, the 6 is a B note at fret 9, the 7 is a C sharp note at fret 11, and then we're back to the 1 note at fret 12. So the next thing we'll talk about is moving the sus2 chord shape up and down the fretboard. So we know that the second chord of the song is a B sus2 chord, And because all of the frets are held down on the strings that we're playing, we can move this up and down the fretboard to sound out other sus2 chords. So we'll take the same shape, the B sus2, move it all the way down so that we don't even need to use our fingers to press the first fret, so that we're just playing open strings. Now that open string is a D note, so this is a D sus2 chord. Now we can visualize our major scale on string 6 and play the E sus2 chord, which is based on the 2 of the major scale, then the 3 of the major scale, F sharp sus2, and then the G sus2, the A sus2, and then our friend the B sus2 chord, and then a C sharp sus2 chord, and then back to D sus2. So the B sus2 is based on the 6th note of the major scale. So this is a 6th chord that we're playing. So when we start the song, we're playing a D major 7, which is the 1 chord, and then we're playing a 6 sus2 chord. And then the next chord that we're going to be playing in the song is a G sus2, which is the 4 chord, 4 sus2. So that's the benefit of being able to visualize the major scale on string 6 and know the shape of sus2, and therefore you can understand that the chords are 1 major 7, 6 sus2, 4 sus2. Next we'll talk about the backbeat that is used in the final 3 measures of the verse. So when you start with the D major chord, it's got that rhythm that we talked about. Going to the B sus2 keeps the same rhythm. And then you're going to shift down to the G sus2 chord, which is the 4 chord. But the rhythm changes, and this rhythm has a backbeat. And what that means is that you're accenting, or playing the chord in this case, the 2 and the 4 of the measure. So it sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The final 2 measures of the verse then move back up to the B sus2, but instead of the original rhythm, it's got that backbeat rhythm as well. So it sounds like this. So next, let's play the 7 measures of a verse. 1, 2, 3, 4. The next music idea that we'll talk about is that the melody is a B minor melody. It's good to be able to play the B minor, the B natural minor scale on the B string, or any string actually. These are the same notes as the notes of D major. So B minor is the relative minor to D major. And you can visualize it as starting on the 6th note of the D major scale. So to play the B minor scale up the neck, B natural minor, it's the 1, the 2 at fret 2, the flat 3 at fret 3, the 4 at fret 5, the 5 at fret 7, flat 6 at fret 8, which is actually not used in the melody, the flat 7 at fret 10, and then back to the root or B note at fret 12. Even though most of what we've been thinking about is D major, the melody, if you were just to whistle the melody of the verse, it would end in a, and that's kind of home. And if you look at what's happening there, you have a B note as the ending note. You have a flat 3 note, which defines a minor melody. That's what makes a melody minor. So you have flat 3, 2, 1. So quite clearly an ending in a minor phrase. So if you look at the whole melody of the verse, it starts on the B note and then goes to the flat 7 note. So the 1, flat 7, and then the 5, back to the 1, back to the 5, then the 4, then the 5, and then that flat 3, 2, 1. So it's very clearly a B minor melody, even though we didn't play a single minor chord. We played sus2 chords and major chords, major 7 chords. So that's an interesting angle to the song. It's more ambiguity. The melody is minor, but the harmony or the chords don't really have a lot of minor characteristics to it. Now we'll look at some of the music ideas of the bridge of the song. The bridge is the part before he gets to the chorus. The first thing that we're going to look at is the notes of the D major scale on the 5th string. And the reason we're going to do this is because we're going to use some chords with the root on the 5th string. So the 5th fret of string 5 is a D note. It's the same as the open D string. So that's the 1. So you can just play the major scale just as we did before, starting with that note. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5, which is an A note, is also the open string, so you can move down and continue. 6, 7, 1. So the major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. The next thing we'll talk about is a series of power chords with the root on the 5th string. A power chord is a chord that contains only 2 notes, the root and the 5. So there's no third, and because the third defines whether a chord is major or minor, a power chord is neither. It's kind of an ambiguous chord. So it's neither major or minor. This is a D power chord, which is also called a D5 chord, and the voice of the chord is root, 5, and then the root again. So that's a D5 power chord. Since we know the major scale on that on the string 5, we can play the power chords up the major scale. So 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5 we can either play up here or come back down. 6, 7, 1. So in the bridge, it actually starts right on the 7 power chord and goes right up the scale. So 7, 1, 2, 3, 4. The next music idea that we'll talk about is a low drone note. As he's playing these power chords with the root on string 5, he's also ringing the low D string. So that's like a drone note. It's a note that just keeps playing as you're changing chords. But since it's the root of the key that we're in, it sounds fine. It gives a more full sound to what he's playing. The next music idea that we'll talk about is the rhythm in the bridge. So the rhythm is a little bit challenging to play because you're playing 3 chords in the space of 4 beats. So you have 3s and 4s going on at the same time. And we call that a crossbeat. So there's kind of two rhythms going on, one group of 3 and another a group of 4. So the way that it's played is instead of playing the 8th notes as downstrokes, you're playing them as down upstrokes. To get a feel for this concept, we can simplify and play one measure and repeat that measure, and we'll see that we have a pattern of 3 in addition to a pattern of 4. So the way that this works is you can basically think of 3 strokes on the 7/5 chord, and then 3 strokes on the 1 chord, and then maybe 2 strokes of open strings. You're going to actually, the 3rd stroke you'll give up and play open strings because you're going to be moving chords. But the main feel is that the 1st chord you start on a downstroke, the 2nd chord you start on an upstroke, and then the open strings you start on a downstroke. So it sounds like this. Next we'll look at the first 2 measures of the bridge. So this will include the chords and the rhythm together. The chords are the 7 chord, the 1 chord, the 2 chord, the 3 chord, and the 4 chord, but they're played with a crossbeat. So think of starting the 7 chord on a down, starting the 1 chord on an upstroke, starting the 2 chord on the downstroke, starting the 3 chord on the upstroke, but the 3 chord you're playing 4 strokes, and then the last one is just on the upstroke, and then 2 open strings. The next thing we'll talk about is a power chord with a root on string 6. So we've already seen power chords with a root on string 5. We've seen sus2 chords with a root on string 6. So a sus2 chord contains a 1, 5, and a 2. So what we can do to change this to a power chord is remove the ring finger, and that changes the 2 to a 1, or root, which is already in the power chord. So here is a G power chord, voiced 1, 5, 1, 5. So it's a full sounding chord. So you can play that power chord as a series, starting with the D. So here's the 1 power chord, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then back to the 1. Next we'll play all of the chords of the bridge. So now that we know the power chord shape on the 6th fret, if we start here, this is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the 5 is an A5 chord and is at the 7th fret. So this is the chord that the bridge goes to after climbing up the power chords on the 5th string. So it starts on the 7 to the 1 to the 2, 3, 4, and then to the 5. But it's a 5 rooted on the 6th string. So it sounds like this. The last thing we'll talk about is the chords of the chorus. We already know all of the shapes of the chords played in the chorus, so really it's a matter of learning the chord progression. So the first 4 measures of the chorus are repeated, so that's 8 measures, and then there's 6 measures at the end. So there's a total of 14 measures in the chorus, and it starts with a 6th string rooted power chord, and it's the 6th of the key. So then it goes down to the 4, and then it plays for 2 measures a 5th string rooted 1 chord, and then that's repeated 6, 4, 1, 1. And then for the final 6 measures, it starts similarly, so 6, 4, 1, and then it goes to the 5, back to the 4, 4 again. So those are the 14 measures, and they sound like this. He slows down and plays the first chord of the song, which is a D chord. Those are some of the music ideas of Everlong. This song has quite a bit of ambiguity in it, and there's more than one way to look at a song, but I think it's helpful to at least understand it in some way besides just memorizing where to put your fingers, so that you can build the foundation in order to play the song better. So if you go to myguitarlessons.com, we step you through not only playing the song, but also all of those foundational ideas related to the song, so that as you're playing it, you'll be able to play it correctly and understand what you're doing. On myguitarlessons.com, we also track your progress so that you can really put in the effort and the commitment that it takes to get good at playing this song. This is not a simple song to play, and we are trying our best to help you in that process.